What does identity mean to you?
It's really hard trying to think about identity, because when I remember as a kid, I could not read out loud, and we always had reading groups. And because I could not read out loud, I had one simple prayer, was that God let the clock strike 3 o'clock so I can go home, because that reading group that we had shattered my confidence. So it made me to constantly renegotiate myself as to, do I belong in this classroom? Am I capable intellectually to perform when I can't even get the basics to show that I actually belong to this place? At the same school, I remember the last time my professor, my teacher, who's actually white, because I was born in Ghana, and my teacher was so passionate about history. He constantly talked about it, and his passion became part of my passion. That is how I began to love history, and history became my identity. But the identity that of history that I took from him was an American history. So here was a little boy who was studying American history in Ghana and not knowing anything about his own history. And ironically, it was not until I went to the United States at the age of 13, and I later, after a couple of years, started college, that I began to learn about African history, because I took an African history class. And one of the projects that I wrote about was the Ashanti Kingdom. And it was about my people. For the first time, I had began to move away and look at myself as someone that wanted to be part of the white community and the white history that I've been taught as a kid. So I had began to really hate blackness or disregard myself from being African. But here was an opportunity for me to renegotiate myself with my history, a history of Ghana, a history of the Ashanti Kingdom, a history that spoke about unity, a history that challenged the production of history, a history that was rooted in storytelling, a history that was complicated. It was that identity that within that history actually came to life, that the people that I was writing about had to negotiate the identity. I began to focus on the first president of Ghana, who's my current research project. And he had to constantly negotiate himself, because he was born in Ghana, was educated in the United States, and later made friends when he came to London. So he was constantly negotiating, and that's how I began to negotiate my own life as well. And it was very difficult at times, because you ask yourself, who are you? What makes you? You're a black man. But then they say education is empowerment. Education is the gateway to success. But then when you walk into the stores, they don't care if I went to Notre Dame. They don't care if I'm currently at Oxford. I'm just a black person who is gazed at every moment, every time I walk around. The identity issue of surviving, that when I walk outside at night, that I'll be able to walk home safely without my mom worrying. That we have to negotiate ourselves to speak a certain way, to dress a certain way, because it became part, surviving became part of my identity. Then the question becomes, what is my identity? An identity that is simply constantly being questioned, constantly being told to fit into the politics of respectability. An identity that talks about, don't forget, you are black, so you have to act a certain way. And not given the privilege as a kid to just walk around, just play, just think. My identity as a scholar is always put into question because I'm black. Because there's not a lot of black professors. There's not a black, quote unquote, a lot of black intellectuals around. So I was constantly asked at school, are you here to play sports? Or what kind of sports do you play? Because they just assume because you are such an elite institution, they brought you here to play sports. So people disregard your intellectual ability. Just one time I walked into I was the only black historian in the history honors program. And I walked into a program where we had, and I was the only black person in attendance. And I left because somehow nobody had said anything, but I just felt like I did not belong. And it really affected me. But then I made up my mind that I would never try to let anything affect me or try to constantly negotiate who I am. That I began to see myself differently. I began to believe differently because I knew that my history, my identity is so complex, that my identity is part of my grandmother's dream. It's part of my father's dream. It's part of my mother's dream. That they never saw the inside of a classroom, but they believe their son, who some classify as nothing, can one day enter the halls of a college classroom. Little did they know that I'll be able to get into some of the top institutions. It was just a myth that I would even be educated at Oxford, because when they talked about Oxford in my country, it was for the sons and daughters of presidents. So here at Oxford, I have to constantly negotiate myself. But then I've come to realize that I've made friends that have become a family that we jokingly call ourselves the villagers of Oxford, where we can freely make a joke, where we don't have to put on a mask to say we belong, but our mere soul is taken as who we are. Because it is that fundamental belief that Obama even reminded us, that I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper. And it allows us to pursue our individual dreams and aspirations, but at the end of the day, we come together as one collective, and it doesn't matter our identity, because we are one people. Thank you.
The sigh says it all at the beginning. Identity is hard. Identity is not fixed. But then again, identity is something that we all wrestle with. And here we see, right before our very eyes, that struggle of wrestling with an identity and looking for that unity, looking for that root in storytelling that our rich African history celebrates. It's looking at a young boy who loved history so much, fell in love with history so much, yet was learning of another people's history. And it was when he learned his own history, he came back to himself. It's that age-old story that we are told in Africa, that education is the answer to everything. But the reality is when we go out, we see that education, yes, it may be our parents' answer, it may be everyone else in Africa's answer to say that this is what's going to get you to go to the next stage. But when you get there, it's your skin that they're looking at. It's your skin that you're looking at. It's your skin that they are looking at because you're still black. And what really struck me in everything that he said was the politics of respectability. We find ourselves pushed into a place where we have to be a certain way to be accepted. We find ourselves having to deal with these microaggressions. We find ourselves having to question, do I even like my blackness? When the reality is, this is something that we should all embrace. We should embrace just as it is. We should embrace ourselves as we come. We should embrace ourselves and our history and know more about our storytelling history. It is your responsibility to find out more about who you are. It's your responsibility to look up your history. Just this last week, I was talking with someone and I was saying that, okay, it's your parents' responsibility to expose you to all of these things. Then I turned around and I said, no, it's not actually. It is your responsibility to find out more about who you are. We have a rich culture. Why is it that many of us are always outward looking? We're not always looking on the inside. We're not looking on what makes us. We're not looking at who we are based on what we are. We are Africans, and we should take pride in that. We are black people, and we can do so much more than play sports or whatever else it is based on the questions that we are asked. And we should be black graciously. We shouldn't have to deal with all of these things, but the reality is we do deal with all of these things. So in our quest for education, let us not just seek someone else's definition of what a properly educated person is, but let's seek to educate ourselves in our own history. Let us seek to find out more about our own history because that's where we find our pride. And let us seek to embrace each other. Because if we look at our philosophies as an African people, it's all about our community. It's all about oneness. So let us come together and be more and do more because together we are more. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you have found this episode so interesting as I have. I have listened to it multiple times. Please do come back for more next week. Make sure you like this video, make sure you comment, and make sure you subscribe. It is much appreciated. And I'm just showing my love. Thank you very much. Mwah.